What's up, everybody? It's Alan's Movie Talk, back at it again. Just got back from seeing Gladiator II, so let's talk about it. I did want to preface this review by saying that, I'm not a, die-hard fan of the original movie. I did like it. I understand its appeal, I understand its legacy, I understand its impact, but it's just not a movie that, I have rewatched a million times or one that I had, a lot of nostalgia for when it came out back in 2000. I was pretty excited for this sequel, but it wasn't like a movie that I was just dying for. So, with all that being said, what did I think about Gladiator 2? I actually very enjoyed this sequel. I thought it was a good follow up to the original film, and I did think it's actually one of the better legacy sequels that we've gotten. One of the things that I was excited for with this film was kind of goes hand in hand with one of my complaints about the original movie. Everybody praises the action and everything of that original film, but to me, when I rewatched it yesterday, it felt a little dated to me, and it felt a little choppy in the way it was edited. But in this sequel, I feel like the action scenes in particular and the gore that they had in those scenes, was done very well, and was definitely an improvement on the original for me. And then I also thought the ensemble, that they had in this film were all pretty decent. There was a few standouts for me, but I felt like everybody, came and did a really good job. Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal, Connie Nelson coming back. I felt like everybody, did a really good job acting wise. And I've seen some people say, Paul Mescal is miscast in this film. I don't really understand that. I mean, I can see what you're saying if you were comparing him to Russell Crowe, but I feel like that was just way too high of an expectation to go into this movie to compare him to Russell Crowe because Russell Crowe did give a very iconic performance in that original film, and then also too, I felt like the story in this film in the first half, it did feel like a little bit of a rehash of the original movie. But something happens around the halfway point. I won't get into spoilers. That really took the story in a different direction than what the first film did. So when you get that context and things kind of change up, I feel like Paul Mescal, not being too similar to Russell Crowe was actually a good decision for the film. And then to kind of piggyback off that, that's why I say that I felt like this is one of the better legacy sequels that we've ever gotten, because a lot of those movies tend to rehash pretty much the entire plot of the movies that they're being sequels of or legacy sequels of. And I felt like for me that's how it felt in the first half of the film, but then they made a change and going a different direction. I think is the best way to handle a legacy sequel, but also not straying too far from the original. So I felt like they found that balance really well in this film of going on with a new story, but also having some familiarity from the original movie. And then, like I said, I felt like everyone here came to act. The big four: Mescal, Connie Nelson, Pedro Pascal, and to me the standout, Denzel Washington. He's one of the greatest actors of our time. At this point, I don't ever expect a bad performance out of him. But he was really the standout here. Don't really want to get any spoilers about his character or anything like that, but he does some good things in this film, and he definitely came to act. And I wouldn't be surprised if we got a nomination for him for this film because he really showed out. And then too, I did really enjoy Pedro Pascal's character arc that he had in the film. Again, don't want to go into spoilers because a lot of details in this movie are pretty spoiler heavy, so I won't go into anything. But I feel like the arc of where Pedro Pascal's character starts off in the beginning of the film and then where he ends was a very good arc, and it was very effective for me. And it like I said, kind of played with you, made you think that he was going to be a prototypical character from the original, but then they kind of switch it up and change it up, and yeah, I liked the arc that he had in this film, and then I felt like he did a very good job acting. And then from a technical aspect, I do feel like the score was very well done in this film. Not, I'd probably say not as good as the original, truthfully, but it does do a good job. It does, bring in some of the songs and the score that we got in the original film as well. So maybe not the most original score in the world, but I did feel like it was effective in the way it was used. And then the film is just shot beautifully. That was, like I said, with the original being 24 years ago, we were obviously going to see some technical advancements in this film, and I was excited for that to see how that went. So for visual score, the action, that was all to me top notch and was an improvement on that original film. And then when it comes to the story, I felt like one thing that it actually did do a lot better than the original was the original was pretty much a clear cut story when it was like you knew who was good, you knew who was bad. Whereas this one kind of draws that line right at the beginning, but then it just kind of goes back and forth, and it makes you question who you're rooting for, who you want to prevail in these situations. So it just made for a more complex situation in the story, I felt, than the original did, and it wasn't so black and white of who's good and who's bad. So I found that to be very interesting that they went that route with the story. But with everything that I liked about this movie, there was definitely some issues that I had with it. So I kind of wanted to get into those. The movie to me has, the question that everyone has been asking about this film is, did we really need a sequel to that original film? And because that film was a complete story, it felt like a standalone story. It didn't really feel like you needed to pick up, from there and continue, right? But now that I've seen the film, I can actually say no. I don't think that Gladiator needed a sequel. And I think the things that this movie does, I won't spoil anything, in order to justify its own existence, didn't really work for me. There is a 16-year gap in between, from the original, the ending of the original to this film. And they did a very bad job explaining to me how we got to where we were at the end of that original film and where we are at the start of this film, right? I know they did a bad job because they literally, I won't say what it is, but they literally added a scene that took place at the end of the movie to justify the story that we were having, in this film. So anytime a sequel does that to me, it kind of just tells me that, like, hey, we didn't really need a sequel. And now that I've gotten the answer of why we're continuing the story and how the events are playing out in this film, I didn't really like it. And that kind of soured the experience of the film in general for me when I got that scene. So, for anyone who was pessimistic about this sequel and didn't feel like we needed one, you're probably not going to have your mind changed by this film. And that's just what it is. And then, like, the main villains of the story, the two emperors who are brothers in the film, we didn't really get much of anything about them. Like, I have seen a full movie that they're in, and I have no idea really how they came to power, who they are. Again, how the events of where we were at the end of the first movie and the time in between then and the beginning of this movie, like, I feel like there was some more explanation that we needed to really justify, like, how did we get here, right? And I don't feel like the movie did a great job of that. And these two are kind of like the manifestation of that, because they're the main villains, they're the main antagonists, but we don't really understand how they came to power, who they are. We don't know anything about them. Yeah, they're crazy and they have energetic performances, but we don't really understand their characters. We don't really have motivations there. So, some people might have fun with those characters, but for me, they kind of just like they're one of the examples of, like, was this movie really needed, and did they justify this movie being needed? And again, my answer is no on that. So, yeah, cared about. So yeah, to me, I felt like there was a lot going on. And even though there was a lot going on, I felt like a lot of the stories were undercooked, right? There was some editing choices that happened in the film, that I felt like indicated that there is probably a longer cut of this movie, that hashes out those stories a little bit better. Like, some of them just got resolved very quickly, and just were very, it was just very weird and very choppily edited together in certain storylines and certain scenes. So yeah, the editing wasn't necessarily the best about this film. Again, I know Ridley Scott tends to want to make 5-hour movies in general, so I imagine there's probably a longer version of this film. But yeah, that the editing was a bit weird to me, and I felt like there was way too many plot lines in the film. But again, guys, so that's really all I have to talk about this film. Like I said, I did enjoy myself. I am positive on the film. I feel like it's one of the better legacy sequels that we've gotten. Just had a couple of issues with it, and some of them were kind of big, right? But I still think that if you're a fan of that original film, you'll probably enjoy this one. You should just go in with no expectation that this is going to match that original one. I feel like that's what I've heard from a lot of people who have already seen this film before I did, was that they were comparing it to that original film, and it's like, I mean, I get it, it's a sequel, it's going to naturally be compared to the first film, but I feel like if you're somebody who is in love with that movie and was a diehard fan of that movie, you're setting yourself up for disappointment by having that expectation. So that's all I wanted to say on that. But yeah, so for me on a rating scale, I'm gonna probably give it a 3.5 out of 5. Like I said, I did enjoy the film, and yeah. So if you guys have seen Gladiator, let me comment, let me know what you thought, and yeah, have a great night.